Today's daf we're going to be learning is daf tzadibet. Wishing everyone a Gemar Tov. Hope everyone's fast went well. Okay, today's daf is sponsored by Medina Korn in memory of Reuven Cohen. Harav Reuven Tzvi ben Harav Moshe Yeshaya HaKohen Udvor Rabbanit on his 5th yahrzeit. Reuven was a dear family friend and master teacher. We miss his warmth, humor, and zest for engaging with people. Yehi zichro baruch. Before we start, I thought more after about the connections of yesterday's daf with Yom Kippur. So never too late to make connections. So I was thinking that there's two things that really come up certainly in the latter part of the daf. Also, before we saw, number one, we saw that there were people who would say things and then turns out they were wrong, right? And that's always a good thing to keep in mind in Yom Kippur, knowing that our knowledge is limited. And as much as we think sometimes we're right, we're not always right. And to accept having made a mistake, in fact, we'll talk about this in a minute when I give you a little more intro to Rami bar Hama and who he was, because he also gets corrected a bunch of times here by Rava. It's going to also continue in tomorrow's daf. So I thought that was an interesting connection, kind of understanding the limitation of our understanding. Number two, I thought the idea of this achrayut, and this is something we're going to discuss a lot today, which is selling a field and taking achrayut, meaning saying, I'm selling you this field, but if somebody comes and claims it from you, right, I will assume responsibility. And this is all, again, another theme of yesterday of Yom Kippur was the idea of assuming responsibility for your actions. So I thought that was also a nice connection to the daf. So before we start, as I said, I want to talk a little bit about Rami bar Hama and Rava and the connection between them and their relationship. And there's some interesting things that I thought would help kind of bring things full circle. There's actually things we've seen before that you might or might not remember. This is a good example of, I don't always remember these things either. And, as you learn them and things come more into context, they mean more to you. So you might remember a story in Brachot. First of all, they're both 4th generation Amoraim, and they were students of Rav Chisda. You might remember the story. It was an interesting story of Rav Chisda, who sat there with his daughter on his lap, and he said, which of these rabbis would you like? And she said, both of them. And she ends up marrying both of them. And that's Rami bar Hama and Rava. And it's interesting because we've recently seen all the stories of the daughter of Rav Chisda and Rava. And so it's interesting to see that in context here of Rami bar Hama and Rava having these arguments, and they end up both, right? And at the time, Rava said, I'll take her second, right? I guess he knew that, right? Taking her first meant you'll die and then she'll be with the other one. So he said, I'll take her second. So anyway, that's interesting to think about in the context here. The other interesting thing about Rami bar Hama is that one of the things, by the way, I've shown you this book before, but it's a very good book and it has lots of interesting things. It's called Encyclopedia L'Chachmei Talmud V'Gaonim. So it has Gaonim and Tanaim and Amoraim. And that's where I kind of gathered this information. It's not like I remember everything that's said. And he also points out, I thought these two things really related to our sugya, the two main things he points out about Rami bar Hama. The other thing is that in Eruvin, it says that he was very sharp, Rami bar Hama, and he in general relied on his logic. And this is actually looked at a bit negatively because Rav Sheshet, compared to him, actually always relies on Breitov and tradition. And Rav Yitzchak, it was told that Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda, left learning with Rami bar Hama for this reason and ended up going to learn with Rav Sheshet because he relied more on the tradition and Rami bar Hama relied more on logic. Now you might think logic is usually a good thing, but in this kind of world, it's limited. And that's what we're going to see here, that he keeps thinking that this is the way things are supposed to be. But in the end, Rava corrects him because he was relying on logic. And sometimes logic doesn't always, sometimes, first of all, logic can be counter-argued. This goes on all the time in the Gemara where we argue the counter opinion. And you see this many times where in the end, the rabbis prefer tradition over logical argumentation. In this case, it's not necessarily tradition, but it is that Rava says you're wrong about this, and I'll tell you why. So it's not like necessarily clear that Rava has a tradition. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's using his own logic to say your logic is wrong. So we're going to have another case. The structure of today is we're going to have several cases. They're not this time cases that actually happen. They're cases that theoretically could happen. They're theoretical cases. We're talking about land. Okay, it's actually a pretty short daf. Content, as usual, with short dafim is a little bit complicated, because we're talking about lien property and somebody buys from someone else and someone takes the land, and blah, blah, blah. There's going to be a lot of complicated cases. I'll walk you through them, so hopefully they'll be clear. So the first two are Rami bar Hama and Rava. In the first one, Rava is going to go against Rami bar Hama. And in the second one, Rava is just going to add a bit of advice to, if you were in this situation, how could you save the situation and not get stuck with what Rami bar Hama says you're going to get stuck with. So it's more like advice if you ever were in this situation, what you should do to protect yourself. And then we're going to have Raba, and then we're going to have Abaye, who also bring situation. Rami bar Chama. We're starting from 3 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Aleph Amud Bet. So there's 2 ways you could sell a field. You could either sell a field with taking responsibility, which basically means, I have a field worth $100,000. I sell it to you on the condition that basically I'm selling this to you, but if something actually, you sell it to me, I'm going to give you all these examples. I'll make you the seller. You sell it to me and you say, I assume responsibility. If something happens, I'll pay you for it. Okay. So generally in that case, I would probably buy the field for what it was worth, because worst case, it'll get taken away from me. You'll pay me back. But then they're selling a field without achrayut. That means basically you refuse to take responsibility. Okay. So I buy it knowing that maybe, and I know I checked into it, and I know you have some people who you owe money to. And I buy it kind of hoping, it's a bit of a gamble. I hope that that your creditors will take it straight from you and not from me. But I know that there's a chance that they might take it from me. So I'll probably buy this land for less money than it's worth. Right? I won't give the full value because it's a bit of a risk I'm taking. So maybe I'll buy it, I don't know, but maybe the market value is $700,000 because I'm going to pay a certain amount less. I'll still get the field, but there's a chance it might get taken away from me. And if it does, I really can't come to you with any claim. So we're going to see cases like this and cases like that. This first one, okay, the first few cases are a little bit confusing. You sold me a field without assuming any responsibility. So let's say I bought it for less money than it's worth, knowing that maybe someone will take it from me. Then, now, I sold it back to you with achrayut. Okay? So I sold it maybe for the full value of what it was. But saying if somebody comes to collect, right, then if somebody comes to collect now, from who? From any debtor, right? Theoretically, it could be not only me, it could be debtors from previously. Now, could that include you? Let's say you owe money and they come to collect the field from you, but you had bought it from me and I promised you, on the other hand, it was your field to begin with. So it's a little bit tricky here. So what happens? Let's say, if your own creditor comes, you owe money to someone from before, the creditor came to take the land from you. Remember, the land was originally yours. You sold it to me without assuming any responsibility. So if they had taken it from me, I would have been stuck. Then I said, I'm going to assume full responsibility. Full responsibility seems to include, even if now they come and collect it from you for your loan. So comes Rami bar Chama and says, since I sold it to you with achrayut, with responsibility, and came a Baal Chov, it doesn't really matter that it was your Baal Chov, and took your land, I assumed responsibility for that. I came in the middle. I assume responsibility. I have to pay you back. Because in the end, the land that you bought for me, even though it was yours originally, you bought it for me, I took on responsibility. To which Amalei Rava says, wait a minute. What kind of responsibility do you think I took? It's true I took overall responsibility if any creditor comes for any loan that was, this property was lien to any loan. But when I sold it back to you and I said I would take responsibility, I certainly didn't mean if one of your creditors comes, why would I have, obviously I didn't include that. Your creditor issue is your issue. What does achrayut mean normally? Like, normally it doesn't happen like this because normally I don't buy land from you and sell it back to you, and certainly not where you didn't assume responsibility and I did assume responsibility. It's a bit of a rare case. In that case, I wouldn't be including if the loan was taken because of something you owed. That doesn't make any sense. So it's all a matter of when I took the achrayut, responsibility, what kind of responsibility did I mean? I meant anyone, right? If a creditor comes and takes the land from you for someone else's loan, but not for your own loan, no way, no how. However, Rava says, and this explains his shitam a little bit better, Mo de Rava, he brings an example where it could be someone else's loan that was also on Reuven, okay? Mo de Rava beReuven sheyarash sedem Yaakov. If Yaakov gave an inheritance, a field to Reuven, umechara leShimon shelo ba'achrayut, and then he sold it to Shimon without assuming any responsibility. In other words, our case exactly, but the land had belonged to Yaakov beforehand. And then so again, you sold me the field, you inherit a field, you sold the right from Yaakov, you sold the field to me without assuming any responsibility. So that means if they would have come, Yaakov's creditors, and taken it from me, I would have been out. That was it. No, nothing for me. But then I sold it back to you, but I said I'm not assuming responsibility. If the Baal Chov, the creditor of Yaakov, comes and tries to take the field away from you, then I would have to pay Reuven back. Because again, I assumed responsibility for all loans that were on it, just not Reuven's loans. But anybody else's loans, I assumed responsibility for, even though, right, that came before I bought it originally and then sold it. But again, because I bought it from Reuven without Reuven taking any responsibility, therefore, and then I sold it back to, or you, right? And then I sold it back to you with taking responsibility. I basically take on even Yaakov's loans, even anything that preceded your acquiring of the land. Okay, so since it Baal Chov de Yaakov, ki Baal Chov de Alma Dame, even though he gave it to you in inheritance, it's still considered an external Baal Chov that I assumed responsibility for. So that's case number one. So again, Rami bar Chama thought to say, I am responsible because I took on responsibility for anything. Comes Rava and says, no, not if it was you. There's certainly no way I would take on responsibility for your own loans. I'm a Rami bar Chama. Second case for today. Reuven shemachar sadeh l'Shimon ba'acharayut. By the way, Reuven and Shimon are usually brothers, right? It's interesting they're bringing an example of brothers. Some commentaries actually talk about that these are brothers who inherited and split. And I'm not going to go into that. Most people think it's just random names being used, right? Reuven and Shimon are the most common names, so they just use them. So Reuven shemachar sadeh l'Shimon ba'acharayut. This time, you sold me the field with taking on responsibility. V'zakaf alei b'milvah. What happened? This is the more complicated case of today. I didn't have the money to pay you. So I basically asked for a loan. So I bought the land. The land is fully mine, but I took out a loan from you for the price of the land. So we'll go back to the land is $100,000. And I basically borrowed $100,000 from you in order to buy the land. Umeit Reuven. In the meantime, you die. And now you have heirs that are dealing with it. And because there's different rules about heirs, we're going to see. And remember, you sold it to me with acharayut. So your creditor comes, says, hey, he owed us money, and the orphans don't have land. Okay, that's important to understand for this case, even though they don't tell you this, it's clear they don't have any land. So they come to me, and they want the land. So I bought it from you, and they had a lien on it. So now, Shimon, he grabs the land from Shimon, but I don't want to give him the land. So what did I do? I happen to have cash on hand. I appeased the guy by giving him money. So I paid off the creditor with $100,000. Now remember, you sold me the field with acharayut. So theoretically, that $100,000 I can go claim from you. So what do? But I also owe you $100,000, right? So what do I say? I paid the guy money, $100,000. That's as if I gave it back to you, right? Which then went to your heirs. I paid back my loan, in which that I paid this guy, so he's not going to bother you anymore. And basically, I should have no responsibility anymore toward you. That basically got rid of my loan to your heirs, okay? Because again, I paid $100,000, which is what I owed you. I got you out of you owed someone $100,000, so zero-sum game, right? It works perfectly. So dinahu da amrele b'nei Reuven. The law is, though, the sons, your heirs, can say and basically claim you didn't do anything for us. Anan mital tele shavik avun gabach. What did our father have by you? A loan, which was you owed him money, which is mitaltaling, right? That's considered movable property. Mitaltaling, right? Money goes into the category of movable. It's not land. The movable property of orphans is not lien to any sort of loan. So what did you can say to me, your children can say to me, what did I try to do? I tried to say, look, my money, right? I owed you money. That I paid to this other person. I'm basically taking that money from you and taking that loan and paying it to this person, right? That's what I basically did. Instead of paying you, I paid him, and that kind of worked it all around. But that basically means that without consulting with you, right, I just took the metaltaling. Now, you're not allowed to do that with orphans. You can only take property. And remember, these orphans had no property. So there was nothing for me to collect back. Okay, what's the issue here? I forgot to mention, this is really important. My achrayut. In other words, I paid your loan back. I owed you money. What do I say? Well, you owe me money now because you, your father, right, you actually sold me the land with achrayut. So I can demand that from the promissory note, basically. But a promissory note is just metaltaling. So I can't do that, okay? If you had land, I could have seized your land and said, listen, I paid the guy $100,000. Now I want your land, right? Because you owe me $100,000, pay me in land. But you didn't have land. So I can't say, put my promissory note toward this. So in the end, I lose out, and I have to basically, I paid him $100,000 to keep my land, and now I have to pay you $100,000 for the loan because I can't switch the achrayut for the loan, basically. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, look, you put me out $100,000. Your father promised achrayut if anything were to happen to this land. So I'm taking it from the loan. I can't do that, okay? Because it's metaltal. If you didn't understand it fully, you'll see the solution that Rava says, and then I think it'll be even more clear. Ama Rava, ipikach idach. So this time, Rava doesn't come to disagree with Rami bar Hama. He just says, here's some advice, okay, for me in the story. What should I do if I were smart? What would I do? I would pay you back my loan in land. What did I do? I paid off the guy in money, so I still have the land. So I owe you $100,000. So instead of paying you cash of the $100,000 that I owe you, pay you in land. Now, as soon as you get land, what can I do? This is like the story yesterday, right? I can now demand the land back. Hadar gavelu minayu. I can say, oh, well, I was sold land be'achrayut, and that land, the value of it was taken away from me. Your father's estate owes me the $100,000. So, and since land can be used for that kind of thing, and it's the whole issue is the orphans didn't have land. All they have is a promissory note. And that's what he tried to use for the achrayut, right? And basically just, no money had to change hands. It was just all a done deal already. Right? He paid out the $100,000. The loan was for $100,000. So just zero-sum game. You can't do that with a loan, but you can do it with land. So he should pay back the orphans with land and then collect the land for the $100,000 that he's owed. So, and then basically separating the two actions and giving the orphans land. Okay, we're basically, I give you land, I give the orphans, your orphans land. They now own land, I can collect it. And this is based on what Rav Nachman said. Rav Nachman. The Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Raba Ravua, Yitomim shegavu karka bechovat avichen, v'achov chozer v'goveh otamehen. If remember what property is lien, the only property that existed in the time that the loan was taken out, right? If they gain property later, you can't, that's not lien property. So that's why always the date is so important. But in this case, since they inherited their father's estate, and in the father's estate, the father was owed money from before. Now, if the father gets paid, if the orphans get paid back, in other words, there was no land in the estate at the time of the death. But if land comes into their possession later, but having to do with some obligation the father had taken earlier, then a creditor can actually come and take from that. So that's exactly what this is. This is land that got to the orphans from something the father had owed, right? And then this creditor, which is the same person, me, right? I basically paid you back the land for some money the father was owed. And now I'm basically going to collect it back from you. So again, I hope I said this right. But if the father was owed money, right? Not that he owed. If the father, I hope I said it right. The father was owed money, right? You were owed money at the time of death. And then the orphans inherited, right? Got property later, collected it from someone, which is what happened here. I paid you back this loan in land. then I can actually, as a creditor, I can go collect that land. In this case, I'm both the creditor and the one who owed the money. So, right, I'm both the creditor and the debtor at the same time, but that could work. Okay, so that's the solution. Rava says for this case, in order for me not to lose out and both having paid the money and get the money back. Amarab. Ruven shemachar kostot hav l'shimon. This is much simpler. This really is a question of when a creditor comes to take the land, is there an order of precedence as to which land? Now, something that's not stated here, but some commentaries talk about this from other places, which is theoretically, if I'm not sure if this is agreed about by everybody, but definitely this is quoted lahalacha. If you sell me land bit by bit, okay, a piece here, a piece there, a piece there, a piece there, and someone now comes to claim your loan, they have to take from the last one that I bought, because that's the order of precedence, okay? Because that last one was still yours at a later date. So they should take from the last piece that I bought. So therefore, based on that, many commentaries explain that this case was where I purchased all your land at the same moment. And then there's no order of precedence among the land, which piece of land is more the creditor should collect from. So I bought all your property all at once. Let's assume that's the case. I now sell one plot of this land to somebody else. When the creditor, Reuben, comes along, your creditor wants to take this land back. It doesn't matter that I bought the land first from you. That creditor can collect from me or from whoever I sold the land to. Basically, the land is all the same since it was all purchased at the same time. There's no order of precedence, even though you might have thought, I bought the land first, maybe I should be the first one you should take it from. No, because in the end, it was all kind of removed from your responsibility at the same time. And therefore, all the land is all equal. However, we're going to modify this in a few ways. Lo maran ela dezabna benonit. Before we get to this, we have to explain. We've talked about this before. Different things get collected from different levels of land. There was levels of land that were considered ziburi, bad quality land. There was benonit, which is average quality land, and idit, which is the best quality land. So, for example, if someone damaged you and they pay you in property, they have to pay from the best of the land. They damaged you. If you're a creditor, you get paid from the benonit, the average. And if you're a woman, for example, like Ketubot Isha, you get from the ziburi. And that's to be able to make it easier for women to get married again. That's the whole thing about china and things like that. Anyway, we'll get to that later. So in this case, a creditor should collect from benoni property, the average property. You have to remember, the money amount is the same amount. It's still going to be a $100,000 field, but it's all a matter of, is it a bigger, poor quality field, or is it a smaller, better quality field, right? Obviously, the amount is going to be the same. It's just a matter, can you claim I want better quality land? So, since the rules for a creditor is they get it from the benoni property, therefore, lo maran ela dezabna benonit. It's only if I sold Levi, this third person, the benoni quality land, the average. Aval zabna idit v'ziburit, if I sold them better or worse quality land, matze armale, Levi can have a claim, and he could say, I specifically made sure when I bought this land that I was buying property that wasn't going to be collected by the creditor. And as I knew that Yaakov says about me, Levi says about me, that Levi knew that I had bought different types of property from you. Some were good quality, some were poor quality, some were average quality. And I made sure, he says, to avoid the average quality land so that it wouldn't be lien to any creditor. So if the creditor came, he collected from me. Okay? Right, me being me, not Levi speaking. So now you can claim it. Number two, benoni nami la'amaran, and even if Levi bought from me benoni, average quality land, even that, it's only in a case de lo shavak benoni kavate. But this is not what we thought originally. It's only if I wasn't left with any benoni land, and Levi bought the only benoni property that I had bought from Reuben. Then he knew he was going to be the one collected from. Now moving to Amud Bet, really see Amud Bet is really short. Aval shavak benoni de kavate. If Levi, when he bought the land from me, left me with average quality land, When the creditor goes to Levi, Levi can say, don't come to me. I left it with Shimon. Shimon bought it straight from Reuben, right? Basically, that's me. I bought it straight from you. When your creditor goes to Levi, Levi can say, don't come to me, go to Michelle. She bought it straight from the person who owed you the money. So, you have no money left, no property to collect it from, but Michelle has, go take it from her. So in the end, we learn that it's only in a case where we're equal, me and the buyer, the one who I sold to, are equal only if I've gotten rid of all my Benoni land, or right, and then the truth is it's actually a little tricky, because now I'm realizing that it's actually not, right? Rava had said he can collect from this one or collect from that one. In the end, it really depends on the scenario, is what they say. If there's only Benoni land in Levi's property, then it's from him. If there's Benoni in my property, then it's from me. I'm Rabbi. Reuven shemachar sadeh l'Shimon ba'achrayut. V'ata ba'al chov de Reuven v'katar flemineh. You sold me a field again with achrayut, and then instead of the Baal Chov coming to you, because you owe the money, okay, so you took out a loan from someone, they come to me to collect from my land. Now, there's a rule that if, let's say, forget the story that I just said. Let's say I owe somebody money, and when they come to take my land, to repossess my land because I didn't pay the loan back, you want to bail me out, and you come and say, here's money instead. They can say, I'll read you the words of the Gemara, you have nothing to do with this story. Go out, leave me alone. Basically, they can claim, what are you doing here? You're sticking your nose into somebody else's business. You have no place here. So if someone's claiming land that I owe them, right, for money I owe them, they can take it and you can't get involved and say, take this instead. But if you're the one who was owed the money and I bought the land from you and it had a lien on it and you assumed responsibility for it, then of course you're connected to the story. And of course you can say, hey, why are you going to her? I'll pay you the money. Okay. Let's say they came to me because they knew I was an easy target or something. So, they knew that I wouldn't give them a big issue if they came and took the land. So they tried to come to me right away. If you remember recently, we learned about this machloket Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. There were cases where we don't hold like him. And one of them was Arev, about a guarantor, right? That you can't go directly to the guarantor. There was a machloket. Can you go directly to the guarantor or not, right? That's when there's an Arev, that when someone signs, if they don't pay, I'll pay for them. That's different than this, because this is, I bought land from you with a lien on it. So it's a bit of a different case, just to clarify. These are two different things. But also, it's the same kind of question there. Can you go directly to the guarantor? Or do you have to go first to the person who actually owes you the money? So here they basically say, if someone tries to come to collect the loan from me, you can get involved and say, Dinu da azil Reuven umefatzeh. You can come and say, listen, don't take the land from Michelle. Here's the money, or here's some land that you can take instead. The lomatze amarle, and the third guy, your creditor, can't come and say, lav bal dvarim didia. You have no place here, because you do have a place here. Mishum da'amarle, demafak mine alai hadar. Because you say, whatever you take from Michelle, I'm going to have to pay for. So, of course, you have what to do here. Now, the commentaries point out that it's really more than that, which is obvious. I think they just don't state the obvious, which is, it's obviously not just that you're going to have to pay me, but it's that combined with, it was your loan to begin with. You owed the money. So you're connected in two ways to this. Number one, you're the one who owed the creditor the money. And number two, you're going to have an issue with me because I'm going to make you give me the money for it. So you're basically saying, leave Michelle out of the picture. I'll deal with it alone. And now they say, Ika de Amre, some people have a bit of a different version of Abaye. Afilu shelo ba'achrayut nami amrale. Even without responsibility, even if you didn't take responsibility, let's say you sold it to me without assuming responsibility. Now, in that case, you might say, hey, you see afilu means even if, but logic might state, maybe in that case, they could say you have nothing to do with this, because in the end, I bought the land has a lien on it, and you won't pay me back. I bought it with a risk. You're not going to pay me back if something happens. So theoretically, you're out of the picture at this point. So now some people say that Abaye actually says, afilu shelo ba'achrayut nami. Even if you didn't assume any responsibility for the land, still, this is very interesting. You can say, listen, I'm still involved here. Why am I an involved party? Because if you take the lamb from Michelle, even though Michelle knew she bought it without responsibility, she's going to have a complaint against me. It's very interesting that complaint is significant. It comes up in Bava Mitzvah also, this idea of complaint. That a complaint, even though I have no rights to complain, I do have rights. I have rights to complain, even though I don't have rights to get money from you. I can still complain and say, I didn't understand. I thought you were going to pay back your own loans and it wasn't going to be on me. It's true. I was not smart enough to buy the property with responsibility. But, right, again, maybe I just wanted a good deal and I was willing to take the risk. But basically, you still are connected to the story. Again, you have to say, number one, because you were the person who owed the money to begin with. And number two, I'm going to come and complain to you and say, why didn't you pay back your loans and left it on me? And that is enough for you to say, I'm an interested party here. And therefore, you can go and pay the loan back instead of me. And because we have a little bit of time, I'm going to go a little bit farther today and go up to the next mission. Abaye. Also, then we'll just finish this topic. Okay, we got to this. I see someone's asking how we got to this. We got to this because we were talking about, and I have to remember now because I taught this previous stuff a while ago, but I think it was all we were talking about orphans. And when they have, chovot of their fathers, and from there we got to all sorts of cases. We there had a case where there was a ketubah. The last case we had really was this ketubah where they sold the ketubah and then the kid wanted to, he sold his mother's ketubah. There were all cases we've been dealing with orphans and other kind of responsibilities with ketubahs. And then also Rami Brachama was a similar situation where Rami Brachama said something and Rava said no. And that's how we got into the first few cases, because we got to these cases where Rami Brachama said something and Rava disagreed. Then we have Rami Brachama said something and Rava added. And then from there, we were already kind of into these cases of achrayut nechasim and selling property and loans. So we continue bringing a bunch of others. That's how I see the connection. Okay, Abaye. Reuven shemachar sadeh l'Shimon shelo b'achrayut. So you sell me a field without responsibility. V'yatzu alav asikim. Now, sometime within the sale, we're going to talk about where and what the ramifications are, where we are in the sale. I start to hear that it's not so clear that you actually own the property. And it could be, some people claim it's their property and not yours. So you sold me property that might not actually be yours. We don't know. And that's going to be part of the issue. If I haven't yet done a chazakah, okay, now, chazakah on land is done with money, could be done with a shtar, or it could be done with a contract, or it could be done by chazakah, which means, okay, we're going to actually see, they're going to describe what a possible chazakah means here, where I start doing something in the land that shows ownership of the land. So there's actually a big discussion here because Rashi here says is if I didn't pay the money yet. So, but later the Gemara is going to give a different example, and it's not 100% clear exactly what kind of chazakah we're discussing here. There's a big argument among the commentaries. But without getting into too much detail about that, let's just stick with the basic case. I haven't yet had full ownership over it. We've done something to show ownership. If, let's say there was only part, right? We agreed upon it, but I haven't yet signed contract, or there's no money, or past hands, or something like that, I can say I'm reneging on the deal because I hear that maybe it's not your land and I don't want to get involved. But once I already did something that shows my ownership over it, I can't renege. Why not? Remember the beginning of the situation. I bought it from you without responsibility. So what does it mean without responsibility? Comes the Gemara here and says, Abaye, and he says, Mishum da'amrle, chayata dekitre savart v'kabilat. You can say to me, look, you bought a bag of nuts. In other words, that's a term maybe they used in those days. You basically bought something knowing that you were buying it without any responsibility. So I don't assume responsibility for anything. If people come and claim this isn't my land, well, so be it. Okay, you knew what you were getting into. You knew that you were buying something without any sort of responsibility, and it's tough luck on you. This is obviously because it's not yet proven, right? If it were proven, it might be different. So now they ask, so at what point is he machzik ba? And there's a big debate. Is this the only way, or is this just giving another way? which again, there's many different interpretations of what this means. Either he went around the field and metzre are the borders. So either he demarcated the borders. Okay, if the buyer went, let's say I'm the buyer, I go and I set exactly where the borders are. Some people say I own the next door property and I took down the boundary between the two properties, or something having to do with the boundaries that showed some sort of ownership that it was my property. That would mean I was machzik. Ika da'amrin. So then again, there's a whole debate. What if I paid money? Is that considered also chazaka? Was this an additional? It's not so clear how to read this also. Yeah. Ika da'amrin, some people say that there was a different version here of Abaye. Even if you sold it to me b'achrayut, in which case you can't say you bought a bag of, a bag full of knots. You can't claim that because I bought it with achrayut. Still, I can't go back on my deal. Why? You could say to me, I sold it to you with achrayut. Now, you're telling me people are claiming it's not my field. Let's wait. If in the end it's proven that, right, it's just a rumor. If in the end they're proven right, well, then I'll pay you the money. So what are you complaining about? We can't renege on the deal right now because right now we don't really know anything. So it's like we saw before, what's the status of a woman who people are claiming that she slept around? It's just a rumor. Just because people are spreading rumors and claiming, people are coming to court claiming that it's their property, but they haven't proven it yet. So until proven, you can't renege on the deal. And anyway, you could say to me, I sold it to you b'achrayut, with responsibility. So what are you worried about? In the worst case, they'll come and say it was their land. They'll take the land away from you and I'll pay you the money. So therefore, you really have no claim. Okay, so what we saw today was a whole number of cases, some where fields were sold with responsibility, some where fields were sold without responsibility, some where it went to orphans, some where it was just between the two of them, some where it was sold and sold back. And we saw all different cases and what happens and who gets the land. Okay, so that's the end of today's daf. We'll start with the new Mishnah tomorrow. We just got to finish the section today, and wishing everyone Gemara Tov, and we will meet up tomorrow.